Our next story is about one man's crusade to help kids find a future, to help poor kids with few expectations go to college. It's also about how far anyone should go to fight for a cause he believes in, and whether the ends ever really justify the means. George Shirley, a civics teacher at a California high school, believed that they did. That created havoc at the school, embarrassment for some of his students, and cost Shirley his job.
My own feeling is that I was fired because I was a pain in the ass. There was a constant turmoil about me and in my classroom.
When George Shirley first came to Alisal High School in 1984, what he saw made him angry. The faces in the hallways were brown, 90% Mexican. Most of the students would eventually drop out. Some couldn't even read. These are the children of campesinos, the Mexican migrants who followed the harvest to this rich valley. And education promised them nothing but a return to the fields. George Shirley was determined to promise them something more.
When you've got kids who are working 30, 40 hours a week and whose only expectation or horizon in their life is maybe to get out of the strawberry fields or the lettuce fields after they graduate from high school and go to work at a Kmart or a Carl's Jr. or someplace at $3.35 an hour, that's wrong. Give those kids the same education the white kids at Salinas High School get.
This is Salinas High School. Here, an overwhelming majority of white students are educated as they live, segregated from the Mexican population. But there has never been a court challenge to this de facto segregation. That made George Shirley's challenge dramatic.
Segregation is wrong. If we file a lawsuit and have to wait 10 years to end segregation in this district, we're going to lose a whole generation of kids. They're going to go through a lousy school getting a lousy education.
So he launched a relentless campaign to beat the odds and help Alisal students go to college. Every day after school, you'd find him at the airport lounge with stacks of test results in hand. He forced students to submit applications, coached them on essays, and twisted the arms of admissions directors all over the country, urging them to take a chance. The result? Dozens of Alisal's kids were accepted to schools like Williams, Harvard, Berkeley, and Princeton, and that changed their lives.
They're making it. That is the American dream. That's the American success story. And they're coming from one of the very worst high schools in the country. You won't find schools worse in the South Bronx or rural Mississippi or East LA or Oakland or anywhere else.
The school board took a chance when it hired George Shirley. Members knew he was a combative lawyer for the underprivileged who had suffered a nervous breakdown before applying for the job. They didn't know that he would be obsessed with sending Mexican students to college and in the process turn Alisal upside down. Shirley didn't know that he'd be fired without an explanation.
I think that firing Mr. Shirley was to keep the school being what it was before he got there, which means a factory for farm workers. No one has a future except the fields.
Humberto Serrano, a junior at Columbia University, went back to Alisal to protest Shirley's dismissal.
I think that the bottom line is we're segregated, and because we're segregated, we're receiving a bad education.
Alisal High School, doing a great job.
The assistant school superintendent is Dave Berteau.
Doesn't a segregated school, though, have to change eventually and become an integrated school in order to raise its level?
I don't think so. All over the United States, we're seeing some outstanding segregated schools do some outstanding work. Now, we got to be careful here. We can't compare our schools, certainly Alisal, with Beverly Hills High School. That's one we like to compare around California. Why? Because they're from another cut as far as socioeconomic and cultural.
George Shirley calls this kind of talk pure racism. And he says he was the single voice condemning a system that school spirit and a championship basketball team just couldn't hide. The school's principal, Gary Horsley, charges that Shirley exaggerated his own achievements just to get publicity for his attacks on the school.
He saw a prime situation, and he came in and he plucked it, and he wants to get all the credit for it. And he doesn't deserve all the credit.
Didn't he help a record number of kids from this school get into four-year colleges?
No, he did not. I'm saying that over the period of years, we've had students, many students, the same percentage of students. The trend is the same.
But you don't know how many of your students have gone on to four-year schools.
We don't have exact statistics for that.
You don't have any statistics for it. You've told us, teachers have told us, that you don't keep records.
We are accumulating those records, and we are making every effort to keep those records now. We have not had, in the past, We have not had those statistics.
John, the school administration has no idea how many people are going to college because they have never kept records. They don't have any records this year. Half the kids that are in college, Mr. Horsley and certainly Mr. Bateau, couldn't pick out of a lineup. They wouldn't even know their names, let alone their faces.
One name everyone knows is Manuel Lopez. Although his family had been reluctant to let him leave home for Bard College in upstate New York, George Shirley helped him obtain a full scholarship and convinced Manuel to go.
Mexicans aren't supposed to go to school. They're not supposed to get ahead. I was just expected to work, help support the family, and that was it. My parents weren't there for me. My brothers and sisters sure didn't think I could make it. My friends thought I was crazy. My relatives thought I was abandoning our culture.
Berteau later learned that Shirley had in fact falsified Manuel's records to get the scholarship, embarrassing both Lopez and the school.
George Shirley is not truthful. George Shirley does his best to make you believe that what he's doing is right and good, to the extent that whatever it takes to accomplish the end that he wants to accomplish is okay.
Berteau says that George Shirley just went too far when he tried to help students, breaking rules, promising things he couldn't deliver, hatching schemes that were hopeless.
Yes, would you tell her George Shirley called, S-H-I-R-L-E.
Once, he even assured the school that he'd raised enough funds to send students on a trip to Washington, D.C. But when the bill arrived, it was clear that Shirley never had the money to pay for the trip.
He flat lied to us as far as we're concerned. He promised to the principal, he promised to the assistant superintendent, he promised to me that he would make good a debt.
Did you tell the administration that you'd make up the money?
No.
You never told them that.
That I would personally make up the money? No. I told them specifically I would not make up the money.
Did they ask you to make up the money?
Oh, sure. And we could easily have raised the money, and finally the board did do what I wanted them to do, which was match the contribution they paid to send the white kids from Salinas High School to the same program.
That sounds like blackmail to me. This was after the fact, after you committed the money.
I did not commit the money. I did want to see the board pay the same amount of money they spent for the Anglo kids from Salinas High School, where Mr. Horsley's daughter goes. She got to go on that trip. The board contributed to that trip. But the little Mexican kids from the east side didn't get to go.
There's a philosophy that Mr. Shirley has, which is the end justifies the means. I don't think that's good for kids. I don't think that's a good philosophy.
Why shouldn't George Shirley be teaching in the school?
I question Mr. Shirley's stability. And I question his tactics. He has trouble defining reality from fantasy. He creates stories. This type of behavior, in my book, is very questionable.
Our Board of Education asked that he take a psychological exam because his actions did not seem to be one of a stable person.
Questions like, do you like dressing up in women's underwear? If you're given 4 choices between colors, which color do you like? Those kinds of things. I'm a reasonably bright person, John. I mean, I know how to deal with a test like that.
The point is that they say...
They never once, never, ever, ever once raised this, ever, during the entire time I was at the school, until after I received the letter of termination.
They're trying to
After
discredit.
the fact, way after the fact.
They're trying to
yes, they were trying to discredit it.
He is sick to the degree I don't know.
How are you?
George Shirley isn't teaching anymore. In the 18 months since he was fired, he has been helping out with his family's business. But he returns to farm worker neighborhoods when he can to check on his students. He is still working on his own to get migrant children into college.
Was he accepted? Yale, that is fantastic.
Despite obvious mistakes, he has no regrets. He thinks he's done nothing wrong. And he says he still goes to the state legislature, when he can get an appointment, to tell his story and make his case against the system at Alisal.
What do you think George Shirley should do now?
I don't know. I feel sorry for George Shirley.
What would you say is his legacy here?
George Shirley is, as I see it, is a modern-day Don Quixote. It's just tackled one too many windmills.
The quote I use with the kids a lot. Quote from Cesar Chavez, and he said, when we are finally honest with ourselves, our lives are all that really belong to us. So it is how we use our lives that determines what kind of men or women we are. I really want those kids to remember that.